personally, like my story with the IDF started in 1995. I was 5 years old. We had just moved to Israel, and at last, after many years of conflict, it seemed as though the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians was about to end. And I remember that around this time, and many of you who are either my age or older than me probably remember this time, there was a big feeling of hope that the struggle between these two peoples was about to end. And I remember walking down the street in Jerusalem, 5 years old, asking my mother, said, "Oh my God, this is so exciting. Does this mean that maybe I won't have to fight in the army when I'm 18 years old?" And I remember my mother saying to me, "Hopefully when you're 18 years old, we won't even need an army anymore." And that was the kind of hope that many of us were feeling back in 1995. Unfortunately, I think we all know that's not what happened. The peace process, which began with much promise, started falling apart in the years following. And unfortunately, in the year 2000, the second Intifada began, and this is really when the peace talks kind of fell apart. Terrorism sort of picked up, and about 1,000 Israelis were killed in the next 3 years. These were very difficult years. I grew up in Jerusalem. Between the ages of 10 and 12, it was not uncommon to hear of a regular bus route that we would take that had a bus explode. It was not uncommon for restaurants that we were eating at to blow up. Really, it was really a very, very, very difficult time. My father's a physician, and I remember him more than once in the middle of the night running out to go and help at these horrible, horrible, horrible scenes. Thankfully, I myself was never exposed to anything truly horrible, and I'm very grateful for that. And so I'm starting with this to try and share what it was like growing up in Israel during these years. Okay, I'm 29 years old now, so this was really happening as I was becoming a teenager. And the realization came with the age of 13 and 14 and 15 that at the age of 18, we're still going to need an army. We're still going to want to help protect our country. And more than that, what I always tell our students is that our role is not only to protect Israel, our role is to protect the Jewish people in general and to make sure that the Jewish people always have a home they can come to. And so I want to jump from this to the age of 16, because when I teach at Alexander Muss, I noticed something very clearly with the majority of our students who come from all over the United States, which is there is a lot of competition around getting into a good college. Okay, and I can see a couple of you are nodding your heads, right? Teenagers nowadays, teenagers in America, at the ages of 15 and 16, there is a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, a lot of healthy competition to try and get into as good of a school as possible. And so what's very interesting is that my students normally ask me what high school was like for me when I was 15 and 16 years old. And in reality, the stress we faced was not an academic stress. From a very young age, I remember feeling like there was a very high competition amongst me and my peers who could get into the best military unit in the IDF. That was like the coolest thing, right? When we, instead of, I don't know, bringing in maybe a college counselor to speak to us or people who were graduated from our school to speak about the colleges they went to, I remember that, on Memorial Day, all the graduates from our high school would come wearing their army uniform, and they would show up to school, and everybody would look at them and would feel very excited. And there was this great feeling of tradition, of it being very honorable to go out and to join a good unit in the IDF and to protect the country. There was a lot of common feeling of pride around this. And so the picture I have behind me on the screen is of an organization called AMHSI. For those of you who know Hebrew, the word AMHSI means follow me, after me. It's a term that we learn first appears in the Tanakh, in the Bible, in the book of Shoftim, in the book of Judges, when Gideon, one of the judges, tells the people of Israel to follow him. And there's something very, very, very common, both in the Israeli army and in youth movements, of the idea of commanders asking soldiers to follow them, of leading by example. And so there's an organization called AMHSI, which you can see the brochure of, on the screen behind me, which is basically was created by a group of released IDF soldiers who decided that in order to both motivate young high school students and prepare them for the rigors of life as an IDF soldier, we should start voluntary IDF practices and training already from a young age. And that way, high school students who were very motivated to be accepted into a good IDF units could practice, could train, and could get themselves ready for the tryouts necessary to get into a good IDF unit. So I myself joined these things when I was 16 years old, and this is not from when I was 16, but this is the typical kind of practice that you can see. As you can see, the man in the front, the back of his shirt says madrich, which means counselor or leader. Okay, and you can see all the young men around him who are all around the ages of 16 or 17. These are all going to be high school students, people who are 16 or 17 years old, who feel highly motivated about being drafted into the IDF, and are all on the beaches here of Tel Aviv practicing, push-ups and getting in the right formations. And you can see they're holding white bags of sand, because in many of the tryouts to get into the good units of the IDF, you have to run up and down hills carrying sand on your bag. And so this is the type of thing that people are training in. Here are pictures. Again, you can see, if you look carefully, that these young men and women are very young. They're all 15, 16, or 17. These are all pre-IDF people. And here they're practicing crawling on the beaches. This is a big event of this movement called Acharai, of climbing up a very, very steep, tall mountain in Israel. You can see they're also holding stretchers, which is something they're all practicing in order to get into good shape. Practically speaking, in Israel, when we're 16 years old, we do not, as I said, meet with our guidance counselors about college. We get our first call at the IDF offices. This is called a tzav rishon, our first call. And as you can see in the picture that I have here, the people here also are young men and women, and they're not dressed in army uniforms. They show up in their regular clothes, and they basically get their first test for the IDF. Health checkups, all sorts of they call them ivchanim logim, logic tests. All right, you get a grade on your IQ level, all sorts of stuff like that, so that the IDF can get an idea of your social skills, your physical skills, and your smarts. And then after that, they give you, first of all, a medical profile. I couldn't find one in English, so I have this one in Hebrew. You can see there are numbers here. Okay, you get a medical profile that's anywhere from 21 to 97. And what's going to happen is, on the day of, in Hebrew, it says underneath every number here, what it means, each medical profile. So the highest medical profile you can get is a 97. And in Hebrew, it says bari lechalutin, which means completely healthy. 82, it says bari im migbala ktana, so healthy with a slight disability. Here, disability could be very bad eyesight. It could mean maybe not such a great back, foot problems, perhaps. If you have a 72 medical profile, it means that maybe you have asthma or some sort of breathing disability. And it's the Army's way of putting you in a category so that they can then send you a letter with the different units that you have the ability to get into. I want to jump into my story quickly, because we could go into a million different conversations about the different units in the IDF. I knew, because I was, again, pretty highly motivated, like much of my peers, that I wanted to join a combat unit, and I was going to try and get into the best one that I possibly could. And then, again, this has a lot to do with the kind of education that we get here at a very young age. And I knew that I wanted to get into one of the four infantry units, foot soldiers. And I knew that once you get into one of these foot soldier units, there is another tryout in order to get into one of the special forces battalions. And the four foot soldier brigades we have are called Tzanchanim. They have the red berets. You can see the red berets. You can see them on the left, paratroopers. On the right, a unit called Golani with the brown berets, which I'm sure I'm naming unit that some of you maybe have heard of before. And then to the right, you can see the purple berets. Those are the berets of the unit called Givati. And then on the left, there are the sort of neon green berets of the unit called Nachal. And these four units all basically do the same thing. These are our four foot soldier units. And if you have a medical profile of 82 or 97, which are the two highest ones, meaning you're either completely healthy or you only have sort of a very mild disability, you can apply and try and get into one of these. So that's exactly what I did. And in March 2010, I was told I got accepted into the Green Beret unit, which is the Nachal Brigade, and that I was going to be a foot soldier. And on the day when you get drafted, I think this is March 2010, I think about 300 people get drafted into this unit. And then what happens is this brigade of foot soldiers, the majority of them go to sort of the regular units. And within the first week in the military, there are tryouts to try and get into the one battalion that is a special forces battalion. And their role essentially is, in times of battle, if a large number of foot soldiers go into battle, let's say it's 300, you want to make sure that enemy tanks are eliminated. You want to make sure that there are no mines waiting for the foot soldiers. You want to make sure that you have as much intelligence as possible. And so what happens is every draft date, meaning every 4 months when a new group of soldiers are drafted, and it's around 300 or 400 soldiers, each unit will have a tryout and will accept about 70 or 80 out of those 300. And those 70 or 80 will make up the special battalion. And then that special battalion is going to train and learn how to eliminate enemy tanks, mines, and gain counterintelligence, so that in times of war, that special battalion will go in first and sort of clear the way for the rest of the brigade. And again, if I'm saying anything that is unclear, feel free to ask. You can wait until later. You can jump in and unmute yourself. You can use the chat. But this is something I knew of going in. And so I was drafted in March 2010. I joined the Nachal unit, and I knew that I wanted to try out for the special forces battalion. I didn't know what this meant. I didn't fully understand the context of what this was. All I knew was that I was educated to try, my best and get to the highest point I can. Again, I used the analogy of college before because I think it's very similar in terms of how people feel at a young age. You want to be motivated. You want to try to do the best you can. You want to try to get into the best unit you possibly can. And that's what I was aspiring to do, much like many of my peers. And so I, on the second day of getting drafted, all those who wanted, and it was the majority, I think we were about 350 people who got drafted, almost 300 tried applying for this. And immediately it's a very big shock because all of a sudden, you get to the space, you put on these army boots. I remember thinking in my mind, oh my God, this is 3 years. Oh my God, this is 3 years. This is 3 years. Like, I couldn't believe that this is actually happening. And you get the uniform on, you're putting on the belt all wrong, and your shirt's untucked, and people are yelling at you. You have no idea what anybody wants from you. You're, 18 or 19 years old, very confused. You were in high school up until very recently. And immediately what happens is those who, and again, it's the majority, those who wanted to apply for the Special Forces Battalion went down and left the base to a very big sort of desert area. You didn't see anything there besides just a bunch of other soldiers with sunglasses on, black hats, and they weren't saying anything to anybody. So we made it down there, and then eventually we were all divided into groups of 20. And each group of 20 was given a hat with a number. Everyone in the groups of 20 were given hats with a number on it. You can see that the guys in the front here have the numbers 18 or 1 or 5 or 14. And basically what's going to happen is, for the next few days, and we had no idea how many days this is going to be, you are no longer a name, you have a number on your head. And you and the group of 20 you're in, right? And there's groups of 20 all over this area. There's about 300 soldiers. You are all going to spend the next 3 or 4 days in that group of 20 trying out. And there were about 2 or 3 other more experienced soldiers there, and they had your name next to your hat number. And they would grade you based on your abilities, right? They would see the hat number. They would say, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. And they'd give you, I mean, we didn't know what they were doing, but I know now that they were writing on a little piece of paper, number 14, was a mensch, helped number 5 when he fell down. Number 13, carried the stretcher for the longest. And then for the next 4 days, we were put through a very, very grueling set of drills. A couple of things that nobody thinks about. It was very hard not knowing how long this is going to go on for, right? Now I know it's 4 days. You basically get there. Immediately our watches and phones are taken away from us. So we don't know what time it is at any point. We have no idea what day it is. We have no idea how many days this is going to last. We don't have toothbrushes. We don't have a change of clothes. We're not going to shower. We have absolutely nothing. We have these uncomfortable uniforms and uncomfortable shoes that we were just given. We have no idea what's awaiting. And then immediately we're just told, start running, right? Start crawling. And you just know that you have to try and do your best. You're hoping that they'll accept you, but this sort of lack of knowledge and this lack of understanding what was going to happen was very, very, very difficult. So this is a common drill. You can see 4 guys up front carrying a stretcher. You can see everybody behind them running and trying to catch up. The first thing that they did was one of the commanders started walking and said, 4 of you take the stretcher, follow me. And you know that carrying the stretcher is hard, but you know that the commanders are writing down who volunteered to take the stretcher. So everybody wants to try and take the stretcher. But you don't know how long you're walking for. It's very painful. And at a certain point, you want someone to switch over for you, but you don't want the commanders to see that you're switching over. So it's just, you just walk for hours and you try and hold on for as long as possible. And you try and not give up. And as you're walking, you can see that within 20, 30 minutes, already some of the soldiers went to the commanders, gave in their hat and said, we can't do this anymore. We just want to go back to the base. And those soldiers who went back to the base would join the regular units. And this thing just would keep on going with the goal of eliminating as many soldiers as possible until the last people were standing. I'm not going to go through everything that we did those first 4 days, but it was very hard. It was really not easy at all. We had the stretcher walk. You can see what we looked like, the stains of sweat on everybody's back, the sand, the water bottles. This happened in the middle of the night. Again, you have no watches, you have no phones. And we were told one person from each tent, and each tent there were 20 people, has to stay awake all night. So how do you divide up the time of staying awake? You have no watch. We can't decide that everybody stands outside awake for half an hour. So you have to trust these people who are competing against you, right? So you want to be nice to them, but you're also competing against them. And then 2 or 3 times a night, you'd be woken up, taken out, walk really for a long time, come back, go to sleep, wake up again. The whole thing was so disorienting, you know. My parents always said that as a parent to newborn children, you never get used to this idea of waking up in the middle of the night. So this is my rude awakening to a whole reality of waking up in the middle of the night. It was very, very, very difficult. And again, not knowing what time it was. And this happened again and again and again and again. There were all sorts of group things that we did together. You can see in the distance, there's a guy holding a piece of paper with a black sort of fleece jacket. He's one of the commanders. And you can see the assignment that we were given, was, as a group, figure out a way to get the entire group under that white piece of string that maybe you guys can see. And as a group, we had to dig and we had to move around and sort of get each other underneath. And the goal was really to see our ability with teamwork. Because these tests weren't only tests to see how soldiers are during long marches, but also how do we do things in terms of teamwork. So again, that was one of the assignments. This is another one of the assignments, which is basically climbing up a hill, up and down again with sandbags, again and again and again and again. At a certain point, one of the commanders held up a really cold bottle of Coke and said, if anybody wants to quit, I'm sitting right here with a bottle of Coke. I'll give you a bottle of Coke. All you have to do is sit right down here with me and you can have a bottle of cold iced Coca-Cola. And everybody would look at him and realize this is a test and just kept trudging on. And this basically went on for about 3 or 4 days. Another one of our tests was you had to hold onto a bar up in the air and you had to close your eyes so you couldn't see anybody near you. And the last person holding on, the goal was to be the last person standing, and the commanders would write down who the last person standing was. And the hard part was you couldn't see what anybody else was doing because your eyes were closed. So you sort of had to try your hardest and push yourself, and it was not easy. It was not easy mentally or physically. Another one of the tests, and eventually it ended after after 4 days. It ended, and And I was one of the 100 people who finished it. And thankfully, at the time at least, I was one of the 60 people who was accepted into the unit. And I was very happy. I was very proud of myself. I was very excited. Oh my God, this was the dream. You know, I grew up, I felt like it was the equivalent of my father who, when he got accepted into Columbia University, right? Like you try so hard throughout your high school years to prepare for this. And finally, you know, I did it. And I didn't realize that the hardest part was in front of me. I thought that, oh, these 4 days, that was the hardest thing I'm ever going to do. Well, it wasn't. It was one of the easiest things I was going to do. I just didn't realize that yet. This tent here became a home for the next few years. We began a 14-month training period where we did all sorts of things. This is a picture from navigation weeks, which were actually happened more in the future. You know, you start off with basic training. You learn how to shoot a gun. You learn how to tie your shoes the right way. You learn you know, how to dig a trench to hide in, how to camouflage, all sorts of basic stuff like that. And eventually the training became more and more complex. With that, the way they treated us became a little bit better, not much better, but a little bit better. And we went on these navigation weeks. You can see here a soldier in front of you. He has a long antenna of a radio device, which, you know, we would use. He has a map in front of him. At first, we would be let out either in the desert or in some sort of forest, and we would be told, you know, you have to reach this and this point by tomorrow at 6 a.m. And we would do it. Eventually, what they started doing was they would take the maps away from us. So we would, all day, we would be sitting in some sort of tree or some sort of bush. We would memorize the lane we would have to walk, which would be about 20 or 30 kilometers, which is about, you know, 10, 20 miles. And then we would have to do it memorized without a map in our hands. First, we would do it in pairs, and then we would do it by ourselves. It's pretty frightening walking alone in the desert at night without a map by yourself. It was very, very weird. It was always very nice to see other people around us. But we had these little GPSs on us, and whenever we got too close to someone else, someone would go on the radio and say, you have to start doing push-ups until the other guy's far enough away from you, because they didn't want us to start walking together. So you knew that someone was watching you at all times. And again, and that was also another element of difficulty. You know, I'm kind of breezing through this, but beyond the physical difficulties of things that we faced, what I found very difficult was the idea that someone was always watching me. And this was true at all times, right? You know, you go from a high school kid to someone who now is told when he can go to the bathroom, is told when he can eat, is told when he can use his phone, is told when he can speak to his parents. There's a certain element of helplessness. And you know, I was very motivated to go in, but one thing I didn't realize was that the physical aspects of these things were not necessarily going to be the hardest part. The hardest part was going to be this feeling of, oh my God, these are the next 3 years of my life. I have no idea what's happening with me tomorrow. I have no idea if they're going to wake me up in the middle of the night and take me on a long march. I have absolutely no control over my life. And it's a very alarming feeling, and very scary, especially for people who are very young. Beyond navigating weeks, that's a picture of me, I'm not going to lie, from 10 years ago. We were trained on special, I couldn't find a picture. The only reason I put a picture of me is because the weapon that you see me looking into, it looks like it's not a weapon, but it is. You can't really find pictures of it on the internet, so I had to find something that I knew I had. It is a missile that is an anti-tank missile, and we trained on this. This is about a year into my military service. I was smiling, which is nice to remember now. I don't remember smiling very much, but apparently I was smiling sometimes. This is from a training course that we did with this weapon. And after training on this weapon, we began taking Krav Maga classes, hand-to-hand combat things. And eventually we got to the part that I was fearing the most, which was the parachuting. I have a fear of heights, and every special forces unit in the IDF parachutes. It makes no sense. I don't even think they do it anymore, but they did back then. This is what I feared more than anything. You can see that at first they teach you how to jump, how you land. The jump itself is actually not from very high. It's about 1,200 feet high. And because the drop is very fast, you can get a very serious leg injury if you don't land the right way. So at first you practice from jumping out of what looks like a fake door. And then after that, they take you to it looks like it belongs in an amusement park, but they take you to sort of like a bungee bungee jumping sort of machine where you jump from about 20 feet. And eventually the day arrives when you get on the plane with the parachute on your back. There's no instructor who goes with you. So the first time you do it, you're totally by yourself. Very nerve-wracking. On the plane itself, there's an instructor with you. Everybody sort of sits on the plane. I don't think my heart has ever raced as fast as it did then. I was so scared I don't even remember jumping, to be quite frank. And then eventually you jump out. It was a really a magnificent, amazing, amazing feeling, because as you get near the door, there's all this noise and everybody's screaming. And then you jump out and the parachute opens. You know, if you're lucky, which is most of the time, which is almost all the time, 99.99999%, and there's incredible quiet. And it's really amazing, you know, this noise and your heart racing and then just quiet. And it's just you in the sky and you're coming down, and, you know, it was just this amazing sense of relief. And thank God everybody, me and my friends all landed safely. Nobody got injured, which can happen. And after a couple times, that was enough. You know, when you land, you have to then have obviously fold the Army parachute, which of course is very difficult to fold because nothing they do is ever easy or simple. And eventually, after 14 months, we finally finish our training period. You finish your training period with a 1 week, never-ending march where you march, I don't remember the number, but hundreds of kilometers. Every night you march 40, 50 kilometers. All sorts of drills that practice everything you've learned. And it ends on top of this mountain, which is called Zealot's Mountain. It's not far from the Masada Dead Sea area. And you climb to the top of the mountain, and 14 months of training come to an end. And then just like after the end of my tryout, I thought it was over. That's it. I'm done. This is it. And then once again, I realized it's not it. I wasn't done. And just because you're finished training doesn't mean you're finished. This is a picture of me and my team, my tzevet. This is a picture, and the reason I'm showing this picture is actually to show you the guy on the right. You can see there's a guy on the right who's not really dressed. He has a towel on his back. He has shorts on. And this is to show you how crazy it becomes. Regular life, regular sort of day-to-day life with real military missions. This was a night before we went on an arrest to arrest a terrorist, a real terrorist who had been passing knives in the attempt to try and hurt people in Jerusalem. And here we are, the night before an arrest, smiling, taking a picture. And next to us is a guy who's on his way to take a shower because that night he wasn't going in the arrest. He was going to be in the room with all the computers that sort of monitors what we're doing. And in a sense, this picture to me, when I see it, I always think about how strange it is, how used to this life you get. To just, you're on the base. Some nights there's an arrest. Some nights you just go out and do regular things. I have to say that from my experience, I felt very proud with the people I was with. I felt that we always respected the native population that we came across, okay? I must have been on 20 or 30 arrests in Palestinian villages. It's an unpleasant feeling, okay? You're in a residential area. It's the middle of the night. Dogs are barking. You don't know, there's windows from buildings that are overlooking you. You feel very unsafe. And you're essentially breaking into someone's house. Now, the person's house you're breaking into, you realize that there's been a lot of intelligence done. These people are not innocent people. You never go into someone's house if there's not 100% certainty that he's holding some sort of weapon there. I felt that we did everything with a very big sense of respect. I remember multiple times giving glasses of water to the partners of the people who were there to arrest. Never ever breaking anything in the house, being very polite in a way. We wanted to feel like we were doing this the right way. I felt a very big sense of pride in how this was done. I'm sure this wasn't always the case, and I'm sure very questionable things happen with stuff like this. I myself was never witness to any abusing of anyone's rights or abusing any. I felt very proud and happy with the way my team behaved. And I think it's something to be proud of. It's really one of the things that I'm most proud of. This was life for us. This was life for us for a while. We would spend a few months training. We would spend a few months on these arrests, doing all sorts of missions. And then eventually, in November 2012, about 4 months before I was meant to get out of the army, for the first time in 25 years, there was a siren in Tel Aviv. Hamas had shot a rocket from the Gaza Strip to Tel Aviv. It was the first time this had happened in over 20 years. And then you can see this is the news announcement on the top right. For those who can read Hebrew, even though it's not very clear, it says "En machar limudim b'darom," meaning no school in the south. Israel started getting prepared for an operation. And on day number 4 of the operation, Mivtza Amud Anan Hayom HaRavi'i, Operation Pillar of Defense, the Iron Dome, which you can see right here, which was intercepting rockets from Gaza, was proven not to be enough, and the IDF decided that they wanted to set in foot soldiers. And I'll just share this one story with you, and then I'll sort of explain how it ended, and then I'll really try and open this up for questions or comments. This was, again, I was 2 years and 8 months into the military service. I was nearly done when this operation unfolded. And our unit was told that we're being taken away from our regular duties and we're going to be brought down to a base right near the Gaza Strip, and that we were going to prepare for a ground operation in the Gaza Strip. And I remember that we were brought down to this base and we were training, and every day we were told it's getting closer and closer. And we were shown aerial photos of the neighborhoods in Gaza. Our specific battalion was supposed to enter from the north. We were literally shown pictures of the areas we were going to take over. We were shown, the IDF has amazing intelligence. We were shown pictures of houses where we knew there were terrorists firing from. We were shown roads that were mined. We were given our responsibilities. And throughout all this, I couldn't really fathom what was going on. I didn't really believe that something like this was going to happen. And then on a Sunday morning, at about noon, I remember being told, please call your families because we're taking your phones away. And we all knew what this meant. We all knew that this meant that there was going to be a ground operation and we were going to go in and we would have no way of contacting our families. We were not allowed to say the word ground operation because we knew that there could be someone listening to our phones. We knew that there could be someone from Hamas who could somehow bug phones from afar. We knew that we wanted the element of surprise, so we couldn't even tell our families what was going on. That was one of the hardest things that I ever went through, was calling my parents and basically saying goodbye to them, which I tried not to be too dramatic about because I knew that the majority of us were going to be okay and that it was going to be fine and that I felt good about our capabilities. But my father understood immediately why I was calling. I said I wouldn't have my phone for a while and that I was going to promise to be in touch as soon as possible, and that everything was okay. But my mother didn't really pick up on it, which I thought was all the best. And I spoke to my little brother, who was very young at the time. He's now in the army, actually. This was 10 years ago, so he was quite young. He didn't really understand what was going on either, and we gave our phones away. I remember my heart racing. My phone was away. We knew we were going to walk into the Gaza Strip. It was something that was just incomprehensible to us at the time. And as the clock ticked down, 4 o'clock became 5 o'clock, which became 6 o'clock. We loaded the buses, and this feeling of loading a bus with equipment, up until now, every time I've ever packed for a trip, it was like, all right, if I forgot anything, I'll just buy it. If I go on a trip to the US, if I forget a toothbrush, it's not a big deal. I'll get a toothbrush. Here, anything you forget, you have no idea when the next time you're going to see it is. Now, thankfully, the Gaza Strip is not Lebanon. It's not Syria. We knew that we were going to get equipment after a few days, but I just remember that as every hour passed, I was like, do I have enough food? Do I have enough water? Do I have enough ammunition? And I would just run to the tent, grab more stuff, put it in my bag. Eventually, my bag weighed as much as I did. I was just, every few minutes, I would panic and go get something else and put it in my bag. There was a lot of tension in the air. This whole thing that we'd been waiting for was finally going to become a reality, which was really crazy for us. And at about 6, 7 o'clock, we were taken down so close to the border that the rockets being fired from Gaza were being fired above our heads. I remember looking up and seeing the rockets just going past us. It was a very strange feeling. We were brought together. We were brought for one final speech before going in. We were told things that probably shouldn't be told to soldiers about to go into battle. Really not very good sentences, like really horrible things to say, which things like look to your right and look to your left, because it's possible that not everybody who's here tonight will be here tomorrow, which is a horrible thing to say to soldiers, which, by the way, touches on a point that I think the IDF needs to really improve on, which is making sure the mental health of the soldiers is in the right place. Okay, these are young people. Certain sentences probably don't need to be said. I felt that that kind of sentence was probably not the smartest thing to say to anybody. For me, looking back at the years, as the years have gone by, I realized more and more how abnormal something like that is. You know, I was 21 at the time. It's not something that a 21-year-old should hear. And at 8:35, we began walking. And as we're about to cross over into the border, we get a call. It's been pushed off by 24 hours. So we go back to the base. All the adrenaline goes out. Everybody puts their stuff away. Everybody gets their phone. And everybody tries to go to sleep. We woke up the next morning again. Same thing happens at noon. Give us your phones, call your families. Guys, for one solid week, I went through that every single day. Every single day, the adrenaline would build. We were about to go in, brought back. About to go in, brought back. Thank God, after a week, Israel reached a ceasefire, and we never ended up going in that year. 2 years later, that changed. Thankfully, I was not in the military then. I was in the reserves, but we didn't have to face that. And after that really hard, psychologically hard experience, 3 months later, I was released from the IDF. And this is the famous picture that people take when they're released from the IDF. You take a picture of yourself cutting your military badge, and that's essentially how the story ends. For me personally, the story ended there. It was such a, I really gave you guys this, 45 minutes is nothing. This is 3 years of things I'm still trying to comprehend in my mind, go back to, think about, when this is over. I don't think it's a coincidence that I immediately fell in love with my work at Alexander Muss, going from being in the military to working in such an amazing environment with young Jewish teens who are so keen to learn and are such really such good, caring kids was amazing for me. I really fell in love with the world of education, and really it led me on my path to where I am today. In terms of my military service, I'm still in the reserves. We go back once a year. It's very strange. It's the same people I knew back then. I can recognize each and every one of their smell from about a mile away. It hasn't changed. It's pretty amazing. I met them 10 and a half years ago, and some are married, some have kids. There are doctors and psychologists and tour guides and teachers and engineers, and it's pretty amazing to see where people have gone to. Hopefully, God willing, everybody will remain safe, and maybe hopefully one day my future children will be able to hear from me that we don't need an army anymore, and I'll be telling the truth. And that's really all I can wish for.